To understand India's campaign for independence from the British in the early part of the 20th century, most notably being led by Gandhi, we first need to take a look at the history of India. The first entry of the British into India actually wasn't by the government, but rather by the East India Company, which competed for influence in the area against the already established Dutch and Portuguese entities and the later arrival of the French. It was only after about a century of rule by the East India Company that the British Empire took over control of India for another century, and even then there were some small enclaves left over from other European nations down the coastline of India. Now, large parts of India had earlier been controlled by the Mughal Empire and then by the Maratha Confederacy, but modern India as a stable, whole country really only began to exist under the British. Generally before that it was a collection of smaller states with their own languages, beliefs and customs. This meant that during British rule, while there were several uprisings, these were generally local or religious in nature rather than an organised revolt for Indian nationalism. Because of a long period of British administration, the English language was used as a means of communicating with the different regions, since the British had combined local ways of doing things, including allowing religious freedom. Mixed up with this was the British administration. The Indian campaign for independence didn't want to just rip up all that the British had done in India. Instead, they just wanted to manage India for themselves rather than having somebody else do it for them. This can be shown in that during both World Wars, over 1 million Indians actually volunteered to fight for Britain each time. All this meant that rather than a violent revolution, Gandhi had success leading a largely peaceful opposition to British rule. Now, at the start of 1946, British troops in India felt they were being ignored and forgotten about, as much of the rest of the army in other parts of the world were being demobilised. So the pressure on the British government from all sides was not only to grant independence to India, but also to get it over very rapidly. Unfortunately, the people of India were not united in what form of independence this should take, with the northern, generally Muslim part of India, led by Jinnah, campaigned for a separate state rather than staying with India as a whole. Now, all this culminated in 1947 with the Mountbatten Plan, which drew up plans for Indian independence to follow in a few short weeks after the plan had been announced, including possible plans for a boundary commission in case of partition. With a short time left between independence, the dividing line between the potential areas, called the Radcliffe Line, was drawn up, but since it covered so many areas where the populations of Hindus and Muslims were all mixed up, the new line would leave many people on the notional wrong side of the dividing line. Independence came, the new states of West Pakistan and East Pakistan, which later became Bangladesh, along with India, were created. But the transition didn't go easily, as Hindus and Muslims attempted to make their way into their favoured countries. This involved 10 million or more people moving substantial distances. In addition to this, there were a great deal of violence and a series of riots, ended up with around 1 million dead in total, with many of this in the divided region of Punjab. Unfortunately, by the end of 1948, both Gandhi and Jinnah had also died, and over the next few years, relationships between the new states moved between frosty to border wars over places like Kashmir and back again several times. With the Cold War building, it would now become critical how these new states, with borders both with each other and with China, would react to the new world order. Now, rather than following the examples of their neighbour China and move towards communism, they kept their ties with the UK and the West, and though they would use their position at times to extract maximum advantage, the suggestion they might form common ground with China, there were still the issues of the small colonies and other European countries that still existed after independence, still dotted along the coastline of India. And what role would the new nations play in other states in the region? And this would come to head later with the occupation of Tibet by China.